A high school student named Shanshan and her parents were brutally murdered in their home. However, the sole survivor at the scene was a man renting a room in the house. Initially, the police suspected this man might be the killer, but as the investigation progressed, the case revealed a shocking affair that led to a tragic outcome. Our final case took place in Taipei, Taiwan, in the bustling area along Section 5, Zhongxiao East Road. On the afternoon of December 12, 1995, a plumber living in Taipei made a phone call to his boss. In a weak voice, he said, "I'm sorry, boss. I've been attacked with 6 wounds. I can't come to work today." After asking for time off, he slowly added, "There's been a murder where I'm staying. 3 people are dead. Please come help me." The boss immediately called the police. Soon after, officers arrived at the plumber's residence. The crime had taken place on the 2nd floor, and the scene was horrific. Blood covered the floor and walls. Red footprints were scattered throughout the room, and button marks were visible in the bloody prints. The police initially concluded that the killer had stepped on a button after the murders. If they could locate the button, it might become a key piece of evidence. During their investigation, the police first found the body of Shanshan's mother in the hallway. In the master bedroom, they discovered Shanshan and her father lying lifeless. Based on the wounds, it was clear the killer had deep hatred for the family. The mother had been stabbed 22 times, the father 9 times, and Shanshan 20 times. Particularly disturbing was the fact that Shanshan's neck was nearly severed from her body. The crime scene analysis suggested that the perpetrator likely entered the house through a window. No valuables were stolen, indicating that the killer's primary intent was to slaughter the family. All 3 victims had been covered with blankets or clothing after their deaths. The police theorized that this may have been due to superstitious beliefs common in Taiwan, with the killer fearing the spirits of the dead might come back to haunt him. It was clear that the killer was someone familiar with the family, and this horrific act was driven by personal rage and fear. Forensic experts determined that the murder weapon used to kill all 3 victims was the same knife, a common fruit knife typically found in supermarkets. According to reports from the neighbors, around 3 a.m. on the night of the crime, they heard arguing but assumed it was just a domestic dispute between a married couple and didn't think much of it. As a result, no one called the police, meaning the massacre likely occurred in the middle of the night. It was known that Mrs. Yu had a habit of staying up late to play mahjong. On the day of the crime, she followed her usual routine, playing mahjong until the afternoon before heading to the market to buy groceries. By the time she returned home, it was after 4 p.m. The terrifying part is that the killer was incredibly bold. After killing 2 people, he hid in the house for 13 hours, waiting to finish off the entire family. Given this situation, the police speculated that the killer either had a grudge against Mrs. Yu or knew the family well enough to ensure he eliminated everyone before stopping. In either case, it indicated that the killer was familiar with the Yu family. But who was this person? What kind of hatred did he have toward the Yu family? In fact, by investigating the victims' backgrounds, the police could have quickly narrowed down a list of suspects. However, one major question remained for the investigators. Do you remember the anonymous plumber who called in sick after the murders? His name was Wu Zhongqian, and he was renting a room in the Yu family's home. Due to financial difficulties, Mr. Yu had rented out a spare room to Wu. Wu told the police that yes, he did hear some arguing in the middle of the night, but he didn't pay much attention. Around 8 a.m., as he was about to leave for work, he opened his door and was immediately attacked by a man wielding a knife. Wu wrestled with the attacker, suffering 6 stab wounds and bleeding profusely. Fortunately, being a former soldier with a strong build, Wu managed to disarm the attacker after a brief struggle. At first, he thought about killing the man in retaliation, but his rational mind stopped him. Instead, he slashed the attacker's face. Both men were injured and exhausted after the fight. Wu then spoke to the attacker, saying, "We have no personal vendetta, so why are you doing this? Let's stop now. I'll go back to my room and you should leave quickly." Wu retreated to his room, locked the door, and grabbed his electrical repair tools to defend himself, terrified the attacker would break in. Through the ventilation window, he could see the attacker in the living room. At around 4 p.m., Wu heard Mrs. Yu return home, followed by a violent struggle, screams, and desperate pleas for help. Then everything went quiet. He assumed Mrs. Yu had been killed. After waiting for a while, Wu finally worked up the courage to call his boss to report that he wouldn't be coming in and to ask for help. When the police arrived at the scene, they found that Wu's rented room was locked. After calling a locksmith to open the door, they discovered bloodstains inside, along with a blood-stained fruit knife. However, Wu's testimony raised some questions for the police. If he had overpowered the attacker and taken the knife, why did he then hide in his room? Moreover, since the attacker's face had been seen, how could the killer have let him go? According to Wu's statement, he stayed in his room until the attacker left before calling for help. Furthermore, the murder weapon, the knife, was found in Wu's room. So how was Mrs. Yu later killed with that same knife? Another puzzling detail was that after the incident, Wu didn't immediately call the police. Instead, he called his boss to request time off first. This struck the police as odd. More importantly, when Wu Zhongqian was taken to the hospital, a button was found stuck to one of his footprints. This matched the bloody footprints found at the crime scene. Could all of this have been staged by Wu himself? Initially, the police suspected that Wu, who wasn't much older than Shanshan, may have developed an unhealthy obsession with her. Perhaps, after being caught by Shanshan's father, he decided to kill both father and daughter, then returned to his room to inflict wounds on himself and fabricate a story. However, this theory had its inconsistencies. If Wu had killed the two, he should have fled immediately afterward. Why would he wait around for 13 hours just to kill Mrs. Yu as well? Because of these inconsistencies, the investigation hit a dead end. The police began to wonder if there was a fifth person at the scene, but Wu remained the prime suspect. Due to media sensationalism, the public quickly convicted Wu in their minds as the murderer, even before the trial. To be thorough, the investigators returned to the crime scene, hoping to uncover more evidence to clarify the truth. This reinvestigation led to a major breakthrough in the case. The crime scene had been chaotic, furniture was displaced, and the walls and floors were covered in blood. However, from the bedroom to the living room, there were clear signs of cleaning. A blood-stained mop found in the room supported this observation. The police concluded that the killer had attempted to clean up the evidence, but had clearly done a poor job. The older bloodstains had been wiped away, but new bloodstains, belonging to the killer, were left behind. These stains were found in the master bedroom as well, and they didn't match the Yu family or Wu. Additionally, investigators found a small droplet of blood in the room that didn't belong to any of the 4 people in the house. Connecting this with Wu's statement where he claimed to have slashed the attacker's face, it seemed likely that the blood belonged to the real killer. It appeared that Wu had indeed been wrongly accused. There had been a 5th person at the scene, and the mystery of who the true killer was remained unsolved, plunging the case back into uncertainty. In an effort to quickly solve the case, the police conducted a second interrogation of Wu. Realizing that he was now a suspect, Wu provided additional details in an attempt to clear his name. Wu claimed that, during the commotion he heard on the night of the 12th, he distinctly heard words related to a love affair. Furthermore, 2 days prior to the incident, on the night of December 10th, he had overheard Shanshan's boyfriend arguing with her parents. However, since it didn't concern him, Wu had paid little attention at the time. These new details gave investigators a crucial lead. They began to wonder if the massacre had been triggered by a love affair gone wrong. After examining Shanshan's computer, the police quickly confirmed this theory. They discovered that Shanshan had been in a close relationship with a teacher named Du Hancheng. Despite the 16-year age difference, the student-teacher pair had developed a romantic connection. In Shanshan's diary, there were notes and information related to this teacher. Interviews with Shanshan's classmates and co-workers confirmed that the two had been dating for several years. They also revealed that when Shanshan's parents discovered the relationship, they were adamantly opposed to it. Could this opposition have driven Hancheng to commit such a brutal massacre? To get answers to these questions, the police first needed to find Hancheng. They immediately went to the school where he taught and discovered that Hancheng had called in sick on the day of the murders. The day after, he returned to work with a visible wound on his face. When asked about it, Hancheng claimed the injury was the result of a car accident and a subsequent altercation with the other party involved. This detail matched what Wu had described during his interrogation. However, soon after, Hancheng requested a week of leave from the school. Sensing they were on the right track, investigators hurried to his residence, only to find his dorm room empty. Even his pet dog was gone. It was clear that Hancheng was indeed the culprit. The police suspected he was on the run and immediately divided into 4 teams, each heading to locations where the suspect might appear. Their efforts paid off. At Hancheng's sister's house, the police caught him just as he was about to flee. He had already packed his car with essential items, including clothing and blankets. If they had arrived just a minute later, Hancheng would have escaped. After Du Hancheng was arrested, the police searched his belongings in the car. In addition to clothes, they found a pair of sneakers that, despite being cleaned, still had traces of blood. The tread pattern on the shoes matched the bloody footprints found at the crime scene. Additionally, the blood on the shoes was identified as belonging to one of the victims. Faced with his arrest, Hancheng mumbled, "I'm finished." Despite having slaughtered Shanshan's entire family, his anger seemed unquenched. He was extremely defiant during the interrogation, refusing to say anything and even shouting at the police multiple times to stop asking questions. It wasn't until the police showed him a text message from Shanshan's computer that they finally broke through his defenses. The message struck a chord with him, and Hancheng began to reveal his motive for the murders and the full details of what had happened. Hancheng, a Chinese Cambodian, fled to Vietnam with his family during times of war before eventually settling in Taiwan. In 1990, after graduating from Taiwan Normal University, he began teaching biology at a high school in Taipei, where he met Shanshan, who was in the 7th grade at the time. The two developed feelings for each other and began regularly calling one another. 6 months later, Hancheng was transferred to Kaohsiung to teach for 3 years, and the two entered a long-distance relationship. The separation was hard on both of them, and Shanshan asked him to return to Taipei. Hancheng immediately requested a transfer and moved back to teach at another high school in Taipei. By 1993, the two had become intimately involved, and they consummated their relationship at a hotel on Fuxing South Road in Taipei. Their relationship grew quickly and became inseparable. Once Shanshan entered high school, Hancheng encouraged her to improve her language skills, and every Tuesday and Thursday, he would pick her up in his car to take her to private tutoring sessions. Shanshan's classmates all knew she had a very attentive boyfriend, and Hancheng believed he had invested a great deal in their relationship. But how did such a deep love turn into hatred? It turns out that when Shanshan's parents discovered their relationship, they vehemently opposed it. They even went as far as locking Shanshan in the house to prevent the two from seeing each other. Shanshan would secretly call Hancheng, telling him to wait by the fire escape at midnight so she could climb out of her window to meet him. However, both knew this was not a sustainable solution. So, on the night of December 10th, Shanshan called Hancheng, asking him to come to her house and talk to her parents. The meeting, however, did not go well. There was loud arguing, and at one point Shanshan's parents even began to hit her. Hancheng fell to his knees, pleading, "Please stop hitting her. I truly want to marry her." Shanshan's parents told Hancheng that if he wanted to marry their daughter, he needed to buy a house as a bride price. However, Hancheng was just a high school teacher with only a few years of experience, and there was no way he could afford such a demand. Unable to meet their conditions, he backed down and admitted that he couldn't do it. This only made Shanshan's parents angrier. They demanded that Hancheng hand over his teaching certificate and held it as leverage, threatening him. Since their daughter was underage, they warned him that his actions were illegal. If he couldn't provide the bride price, they demanded 12 million Taiwanese dollars to keep the relationship a secret. If he refused, they threatened to report him to the Ministry of Education, which would ruin his reputation and send him to prison. At that time, 12 million Taiwanese dollars could buy 2 to 3 houses in Taiwan, a sum that Hancheng couldn't possibly pay. The negotiations ended in a bitter disagreement. What's even more shocking is that Shanshan wasn't their biological daughter. She had been adopted. Mr. Yu had previously worked in the construction industry, but after business went bad, he got involved in gambling and was even convicted at one point. Shanshan's mother was also addicted to mahjong. Neither of them had stable jobs, and they frequently borrowed money to gamble. They had hoped that one day they could profit from their adopted daughter. To Hancheng, their actions were no different from selling their daughter. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He was just a high school teacher, and yet this greedy family was treating him like a lamb to be slaughtered. His anger soon extended to Shanshan as well. During the discussion, he felt that she didn't try to stop her parents' demands and didn't even defend him. In his emotional state, even things that had never bothered him before began to take on new meaning. Hancheng recalled how, when Shanshan had taken on a part-time job to help cover her tuition, she had grown close to another man. Hancheng became convinced that she had betrayed him. On the day of the murders, Hancheng and Shanshan had their final phone call. In the conversation, which lasted over an hour, Shanshan told him that even if he came up with the money, her parents would never approve of their marriage. In the end, they agreed to meet later that night in the alley behind her house. Feeling both resentful and furious, Hancheng hung up and went to a supermarket, where he bought a fruit knife, determined to end it all with the Yu family. He followed the path Shanshan had mentioned, climbing up to the second-story roof and sneaking into Shanshan's house through the kitchen window. Soon after, Hancheng stormed into the master bedroom and stabbed Mr. Yu while he was sleeping. As Mr. Yu woke up and fiercely resisted, his cries for help also woke Shanshan in the adjacent room. When she rushed in to try to stop Hancheng, he didn't stop. Instead, he flew into a rage. In his mind, she had enabled her parents' demands and betrayed him. He turned the knife toward her and attacked. Shanshan, in her final moments, likely couldn't comprehend why the man she loved most would be so brutal. Before she died, she raised her middle finger at Hancheng, using that gesture to express her anger and despair. Having not yet found Mrs. Yu, Hancheng stayed inside the house. He later discovered there was a tenant, Wu Zhongqian, and attempted to kill him when he exited his room, hoping to eliminate any witnesses. However, Wu managed to disarm Hancheng and, unexpectedly, did not attempt to kill him in return. Realizing the tenant was uninvolved in the matter and had promised not to expose him, Hancheng made a deal with Wu, instructing him to stay in his room and not move while he waited in the living room. During this time, Hancheng, exhausted, even dozed off. However, Wu did not take the opportunity to escape. When Mrs. Yu returned home around 4 p.m., before she could even retrieve her keys, Hancheng stabbed her repeatedly, 20 times, taking her life. At this point, you might wonder about the knife used in these attacks. If Wu had taken the knife and locked it in his room, where did the knife used to kill Mrs. Yu come from? By coincidence, after Wu disarmed him, Hancheng went into the kitchen in search of another weapon. On the dish rack, he found an identical fruit knife, the same as the one he had initially brought with him. So in fact, there were 2 knives used in the crime, identical in size, width, and length. This mystery was now solved. Everything was clear now. But what about the message on Shanshan's computer that had finally broken through Hancheng's defenses? At first, he thought Shanshan had betrayed him and sided with her parents, but it turned out to be a tragic misunderstanding. Shanshan hadn't betrayed him at all. In fact, she had left a message on her computer that read, "Tonight, I'm going to run away with the one I love most." When Hancheng saw this message from his girlfriend, he completely broke down. But by then, it was too late for regrets. Perhaps the stress of being on the run for days, combined with pent-up emotions, had left him unable to sleep soundly. After confessing everything, Hancheng fell asleep on the sofa at the police station, causing the officers present to feel a twinge of pity for him. The anger and emotional turmoil of Hancheng resulted in the deaths of 3 people and the injury of another. In the end, he had to pay the ultimate price for his horrendous crime. In 1998, the Supreme Court sentenced Hancheng to death, and the execution was carried out swiftly. Perhaps, even up until the moment of his execution, the twisted love and hatred from this ill-fated relationship continued to echo in Du Hancheng's mind. If only he had been able to exercise more patience at the beginning, or had opened his heart to talk things through with Yu Shanshan, maybe this tragedy could have been avoided. Dear viewers, have you ever felt overwhelmed by anger, where it seems to take complete control of your mind? When all your thoughts are clouded by negativity, leading to regret? And then, you're left with the words, if only. Have you ever experienced this feeling? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. For now, goodbye, and see you next time.